So thanks very much for inviting me. I have the pleasure to teach here this week again, and I did the first time I came here last year, and had the pleasure of being here at the World Peace Academy. That's exciting for me. It's a learning opportunity for me, and I'm sure you can imagine how it is to work with a group that is of, how do I say, massive diversity, excessive diversity, of people, different ages, different backgrounds, different countries, cultures, different languages. It is a challenge and a great pleasure to work with that group. It was last year, it is this year, so hello everyone. Again, we saw each other this morning. I thought about what I could do for this public lecture this time. And I think last time I was focusing more on the multi-stakeholder process as such, and this time I thought, let me bring an example from my current work, which is indeed focusing on the local level. It is focusing on Germany, and I'm quite happy to contribute to something called Energiewende, which basically translates into a total turnaround on energy policy and a change of the energy system in Germany that the government has decided to embark on about 1.5 years ago. And part of that is to initiate change and transformation at local municipality level. And this is where there's a program called Climate Dialogue, which I'm responsible for. So that's what I will be talking about, and I thought I'll give you a little background of the energy policy situation in Germany right now, and of the climate policy and the climate goals, just for you to know what kind of context are we operating in. I'm not sure how well known this is in the climate circles, the climate policy circles. People do watch what the Germans are doing, and Klaus Töpfer, former minister in Germany and former head of the United Nations Environment Program, recently said, well, the world is watching, because if the Germans try it, it might just work. So, because we are so known to be so thorough and disciplined and whatnot. So, anyway, it seems to be a serious decision and a serious effort, and so I want to give a bit of a background on that before I tell you more about what's happening at the local level, how that is being supported, and what dialogue processes can contribute to that. Just as a little caveat for myself, as Kathleen said when she introduced me, I've been working with international organizations and governments and companies and research networks, and I also do some advocacy work on gender issues, and for me it is still a little weird to present something that the German government, my government, is doing, and to say I'm happy to contribute to that. It's in my previous years it was more common to be in opposition to the government or to try and convince the government to do something, whereas in this particular case right now it is actually quite, ooh, they gotten something, so let's engage. And most of the NGOs, the environmental groups in Germany, and a lot of the networks actually feel the same way. And they sit there and say, okay, we are happy to contribute, but we're going to go back to opposition if you don't do it right. So it's an interesting process within the whole of the assembly of actors, so to say, on these issues in the country right now. So I would encourage you to interrupt me if you have questions or clarification. That doesn't bother me at all. And I hope I don't speak very long, maybe 45 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and we get some discussion time then. This is the World Peace Academy, and sometimes it's not so obvious to people why we would talk about environmental issues or about climate issues. I'm quite sure that you are aware of why we're doing that, but just to recap that frame or that linkage between peace, between dialogue processes, between engaging multiple stakeholders and environmental issues, issues of natural resources or climate change. Well, on the one hand, issues of natural resources, environmental degradation and climate change cause conflict. There's a report from the UN Environment Program from 2009 saying that, or they were estimating that about 40% of intrastate violence, violent conflict, is linked to natural resource issues, and they looked at the years between, I think, 1949 and 2009, which is a lot. And you might know these studies about Darfur and similar areas where there's a suggested linkage to issues of climate change and environmental degradation, and direct linkages to increasing population pressure, which is then being utilized by different power groups and ending up in a violent conflict. So there's quite immediate relevance of environment or linkages between environmental issues and peace and conflict issues or processes of engagement that dealing with conflict. Yes?
Would you consider a natural resource, not gold or these
you mean
earth, these...
Yes, I would. These are all.
You would as well?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the term natural resources, it is actually, you could claim it is very difficult to find any conflict that is not relating to any kind of natural resources. If you look around us, everything that we see has been mined or grown. Yeah? So we're all going back to natural resources. What I mean here, what is meant in the research is more the immediately visible natural resources that we need for our lives. Not necessarily what you dig out of the ground and then sell, but fresh water, healthy air, good soil, and a climate that allows us to thrive in. Yeah? Biodiversity, the traditional environmental issues. So they can cause conflict, directly or indirectly, but also in terms of if we're not in a conflict yet, and we look at the future, in terms of climate change, in terms of overusage of natural resources, if we want to look into that future and be smart about how we develop, we also need processes that engage stakeholders, that engage actors, that include people in the planning. After all, for example, you can look at climate change adaptation. So our challenge to adapt to a changing climate, as it will happen inevitably from where we are now, you can look at that as a development process. Not only in the developing world, but everywhere. This will apply to countries like the Netherlands that will be flooded, subject to flooding. It applies to your mountain ranges here. You're probably very familiar with the changes that are going on. That will immediately affect your freshwater supply. It will affect the safety of your power supply. It will affect your economy with regard to tourism and so on. So there's quite a lot of climate change related challenges in the Alpine region. So I think there's plenty of linkages between thinking about processes that allow us to engage everyone that needs to be engaged, and transforming or preventing conflict in relation to natural resources. So that's why I feel it's proper to discuss even at the WPA. This is taken from a German Environment Ministry publication. Forgive me, but this is, I found quite a summary. And they're observing 3 global mega trends. One is the increase in population and the estimated 9 billion that we will hit around the year 2050, if not earlier. The increasing demand particularly for fossil fuels in terms of generating energy, in terms of allowing transport, including transport of products, and production of certain consumption goods. So there's an increase, an ever-increasing demand for fossil fuels, as in oil and gas, and there's increasing climate change. Of course, these are very closely linked, these mega trends. And from an environmentalist perspective, the challenges are climate change, where we know some of the changes that are coming towards us, but not everything, and we don't know exactly what will happen where. An energy crisis, as in meeting the demand and meeting the need to provide equitable access to energy everywhere in the world, which is something that the international community has declared that there is a right to energy supply no matter where you are in the world, so that you have light in the evening to read, that you have access to knowledge through the internet, and so on and so forth. And an economic crisis that has been coming up repeatedly, as we all know. Solutions to these challenges are broadly, you can broadly summarize them into using energy much more efficiently than we do and not wasting it the way we do, replacing non-renewable energy sources with renewable energy sources, and building an economy that is actually sustainable rather than the unsustainable economy that we have now, meaning externalities, negative impacts on the environment that are not included in our economic reasoning right now. We just leave them on the side. We don't calculate them, which gives us much lower prices on consumption goods than we would have if we would internalize all these external costs, like the harm that we're doing to the environment. So we need to build a different economy that is not based on our hunger for oil and our need for burning fossil fuels, and that is economically sustainable and safe as much as it is environmentally sustainable. Which basically means if we had all that, efficient use of energy, renewables, in a sustainable economy, as big as that is, we would have reduced emissions of greenhouse gases, which is the main cause of climate change. We would have sustainable energy supply, and we could have healthy economic growth. Okay, it all sounds very nice vis-a-vis these challenges. It looks a little bit dark. Okay, so if that's the backdrop, let's look at one country and its emissions. You don't have to read this in detail. This is the emission trends in Germany since 1990. This is the base year that the international negotiations usually look back to. So in comparison to 1990, we see a certain increase, and the goal is, the targets are decreases as compared to 1990. Now, the colors indicate in which sector, in which area of activity these greenhouse gas emissions occur. That doesn't need to interest us now so much. The interesting bit I find is that here, this is in million tons of CO2 equivalent. We have 1,246 in Germany in 1990, and then it went down quite nicely. This is the Kyoto target, so we kind of hit that. And this is the target that the government has put forward now. Now this looks quite nice, doesn't it? Unfortunately, Germany is one of the few countries where this looks so nice. And that's not only because we made so much effort, it is because we were unified with East Germany. Exactly. And a lot of the industry in East Germany got shut down because it was so inefficient and it couldn't be rebuilt and renovated in a way that it would make money in a capitalist economy. So they got shut down, and people moved from east to west. It's a trend that is still going on. But that cut our emissions big time. So it looks good because of that historical moment that was chosen here. So we're mostly just lucky that the statistics look like this. But even with that, even with a third of the country shutting down a large part of its industry, it is still nowhere near where it would have to be. This is a 40% goal as compared to 1990. This is not a long period of time. These are 22 years and of efforts, and we're still here. In other parts of the world, as you know, the numbers have gone up because industrialization is going on, and in other industrialized countries in the world, some of them have succeeded in lowering emissions and some of them are kind of there. This is also, the side effect of an economic crisis that also cuts emissions. So it's an immediate indicator of, okay, what do we want? Lots of people losing their jobs, or do we want to cut emissions? So, we can't decide either or, we have to find a different solution. That's very obvious. The targets with regard to CO2 emissions and renewable energy use in Germany are like this. This is the target is to by 2050, so in the next 38 years, which is not such a long time, to reduce greenhouse gas (GHG) emissions by 80 to 95%. That's a lot. Yeah, that means you hardly use them anymore. You hardly have any emissions anymore. Increasing the use of renewable energy by 80% in electricity production and 60% in energy use, and reducing energy consumption by 50%, electricity consumption 25%, energy use in buildings 80%, and transport 40%. That's our holy grail. Yeah. This is some people say this will be the most difficult thing to do, because this is where the lifestyles really have to change. So that's the targets. There's expectations as regards the economic effects of reaching these targets. Oh, I forgot to translate some of this. So the expected effects of a 40% decrease in emissions by 2020, which is the German goal within the EU, are actually quite positive economically. Creating about 500,000 new jobs, saving money on imports, 22 billion euros is the estimate. That's where when mayors of local communities say, now we have wind energy, I'm not going to send our money to Russia anymore, and they're quite proud of it. That's energy imports. 20 billion euro increase in GDP is the estimate, and 180 billion reduction of national deficit by 2030. So that actually, that looks quite good. And similar effects are expected at the local level, meaning at municipality level of villages, small towns, big cities. So the claim is, this is a good game to play, and it will do us good economically. So within that framework of discussion, that's the discourse that the government in particular is pushing, or has been pushing for the last few years. Still, as you know, nuclear energy played a big role. It still plays a big role in Germany, and it has this characteristic of not emitting CO2. So in the climate discourse, in the climate debate, there will be people who push for nuclear energy because it doesn't harm the climate. Well, it can harm the environment big time, and of course it does impact the climate because a lot of CO2 emissions are associated with producing the fuel that you use and with trying to store whatever you have left over. However, in Germany, the government decided to keep the nuclear power plants, in part to meet the climate targets. And then the disaster of Fukushima happened, and our Chancellor, Mrs. Merkel, came out and said, okay, now I've had it, I've changed my mind, let's phase out nuclear. And this is what is now being called Energiewende. So there was a total turnaround within the government in June 2011, so a few months after the disaster of Fukushima. And basically it's about phasing out nuclear power over the next, we have another 11 years. The climate and energy targets by 2050 are the ones that I told you about. Fundamental restructuring of the energy system that will be necessary to achieve these targets. There are programs supporting innovation and the use of new technologies to spread them. So there's a lot being done to stimulate the market, for example, around LED instead of traditional light bulbs. Or systems that control the heating and airing of buildings. So the government is basically providing subsidies to develop markets and make these products cheaper, and trying to create jobs and maintain the economic growth. That's basically the package that has been decided. As I said, to many environmentalists, surprise. And there was lots of debate on how credible this would be, but it seems that it's not gone away, and this thing has an increasing budget. That's an interesting aspect, by the way. How is this being financed? A lot of the change of the energy system and the meeting of the climate targets is financed through the European emissions trading system. Now this is basically, if you don't know nothing about it, it's not a problem. It is basically, the fact is that within the European Union, to an increasing percentage, those who cause emissions, CO2 emissions that harm the climate, have to buy the permission to do that. And that's particular sectors of industry where this market was introduced. A few years ago, they started, people got the, they do get certificates that say this is how much you can emit. And the companies wrote to Brussels and said, this is how much we need because that's what we emit. And in the first phase, they got all their permits and just to get them used to it. In the second phase, that ends now, they had to pay, and if you look at the 100% of certificates that were being distributed, 10% were earmarked for being auctioned. So you have to pay, you don't have to pay much for your certificates, but if you need a little more, the last 10% that you need, you have to go to auction and bid for them. And that can become more and more expensive. And this percentage of what is being auctioned is being increased so that the industry has to pay more and more to get the right to emit. So that's the background. And what happens with that money? There's money, there's quite a few billions that are being generated through that process. And most of the European governments have decided that a percentage of that money, of that income, will go into investing in renewable energies and phasing out fossil fuel. In Germany, part of that money goes into German efforts at home to change the energy system, and some of it goes to developing countries supporting renewables, and of course supporting our industry because we export solar technologies and we export wind technologies, as you probably know. So the money comes out of the polluting system itself, which is of course another cause for debate. Now what strikes me and what engages me in this whole thing is that this turnaround of the energy system, called Energiewende, is really seen as a process. It is seen as a complex process including a diversity of actors, change strategies and steps. And even the government openly saying and quoting, nobody really knows how to do it yet. So these are quotes from ministers and chancellors' speeches, who say, okay, this is a complex process of transformation that we're embarking on. Nobody knows how exactly it's going to take place. We will have a lot of things where we don't know how to do it. We need to include everyone, and we need to be very innovative to succeed. So that's what appealed to me, because if I'm into using dialogue and dialogic approaches to transform systems, then here is an official process that says exactly that. They also realize that this is not about pushing one button or making one decision or one change. It's a multiplicity of changes that will be needed to turn this tanker around. It's crucial to involve all actors, so to have everybody involved who can impact the part of the system that needs to be impacted. And if you sit back and think about energy here, and transport and production, there isn't really much that wouldn't be impacted by the fact that you want to change energy supply and turn it around. No? So there isn't much of our lives that wouldn't be affected by it. So it is seen as a process, as I said. It is known that we don't know really how it's going to work in every particular case. It is known that we have to involve everybody, and that we have to even generate some of the knowledge in the process itself. So we have to continuously learn and see how things are going, and we have to share that around. And this is also something that appealed to me, and that is that if you claim that you have to involve everybody to bring about a change, but we don't really know yet how we're going to do it, then you need to lead in a different way. For you, you're coming from the peace and development field, that's nothing new. If you talk to an environmentalist or economists who sit in the finance ministry, a facilitative leadership style, where you, yeah, you go, exactly, yeah, where you listen to everyone and you create the space for people to generate knowledge together and do something together, that's a very different thing. And even, and I get to that now, at the local level, where you have mayors who lead communities, that's a different leadership style that they will need. You get your hand?
I think great that we have all these processes. What I think is missing is the communication process.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything is fine, but if you don't communicate,
Mm-hmm.
then you're into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think there's also a sort of communication handbook or something like that?
Oh, I think that's maybe it's what we're getting to, but let me know if we're not. Yeah. Okay. So I would like to now focus on what I'm actually working on with local authorities. So part of that national climate program and the whole initiative is working with companies and industries, working with consumers, is impacting schools and kindergartens and changing curricula and so on. But it's also, there is a focus on local authorities and working with municipalities. And that's what I'm involved in. It is actually quite a big part, although local authorities don't control the local economy. Yeah? They don't control all the buildings, but they do have a special role to play. They can create structures and frameworks at the local level, for example, in terms of transport and the way they allow buildings to be built, or the way they allow their lands to be sold and used. So a local authority, for example, can decide that in this new area where we're building living spaces for people with lower income, we will only have passive standard buildings, meaning we will only allow buildings to be put up that don't use more energy than they produce themselves. That's a local authority. In Germany, it's a local authority decision. So if the planning office and the local authority says, you can't build like you built 20 years ago, you now have to build in an energy neutral way, then builders will have to adhere to that. So they can actually impact quite a bit in terms of newly put up buildings, where it is about old buildings, and as you know, we have a load of them in Germany. The local authority can set an example by renovating their own buildings. There's 180,000 municipal buildings in Germany, so there's quite a bit to insulate, and that is going on. And they can provide incentives for private house owners in their locality to do the same. So there's systems where the local authority, with the help of regional development banks, can provide additional funding, for example, for house owners to insulate their roofs, to insulate their houses. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that local authorities can do if they have the means to do it. And that's exactly what the government is doing. They're providing a pot of money for the local authorities to make those kinds of decisions and support them in renovating and putting up new transport systems that are using electricity, and what's the third big thing? The third big thing is street lighting. Yeah? So we have, if you look around in your town, you walk along, when you walk home tonight, look how many street lights there are, and you're happy that they're there because it makes you feel safe. But most of them will not be energy efficient. If you have a traditional bulb in a street light and you replace that with an LED, you can cut 60 to 80% of emissions. And they will last much longer. So, but they're expensive. So what's happening in Germany, and I think this is spilling over across Europe, is that there's a lot of subsidies that went into developing LED street lighting. Companies like Philips have made a lot of money from that. And now, because it's being subsidized, local authorities are able to go and buy them, and the prices have gone down and down and down. 3 years ago, the government provided 60% of the cost for a local authority to buy the new streetlight technology. Last year it was 40%, and now it's 25% because the prices have gone down so much. So that's a, you know, some people call it like a communist state intervention, but it is for that goal, and citizens in Germany at the moment at least accept it. So although the municipalities don't seem to be so powerful as they're ruling a lot, they can set example and they can incentivize climate-friendly using of climate-friendly technologies, renovating buildings, and so on. So that's the support that is being financed through the European Emission trading system, as I said. So the money is coming from, basically it's coming from industries and going into a central pot, and some of that money is being spent to support local authorities. They can renovate schools and kindergartens. Churches can apply as well, particularly to renovate their buildings and use climate-friendly technology. This was introduced in 2008, so it then became part of the Energiewende policy later on, and about 2,000 projects have been undertaken. We have 14,000 municipalities in Germany. These 2,000 projects come from around 1,000 localities, so there's a long way to go. And the amount of money is actually not that high. So these are the things that are actually supported. So a local authority, a mayor, can apply for support to develop a climate strategy for the town or the village where they are. They can apply to get a change agent put into the municipal Verwaltung, into the administration, to actually implement the climate strategy. So there's then 1 or 2 people who sit there, and their job is to get everybody together to implement that strategy. So these people facilitate a lot at the local level, working with the building companies, working with the transport companies, and they can get support for communication, for campaigning, for communicating with citizens, and they can get process support. So if the local authority says, we will really want to do this as a participatory process here, and we want to have citizens engage, but they don't know how to do that. A lot of them say, well, but we invite everybody, then everybody's going to come, and what do we do then? And they're going to have demands, and then we can't meet them, and what are we going to do then? Or we invite, and we have this big hall, and nobody comes, and what do we do then? So it's just not their area of expertise. They're really good at running their towns, but they're not necessarily good at participatory processes and dialogue processes. So they can now apply for money to get somebody to help them to do it. Yeah. Which means, to design a process for a particular village, for a particular town, to engage all the stakeholders at the local level, to look at, okay, do we want to become climate friendly, and how are we going to do it? So there's support for those kinds of things. And then there's support for technologies, in reducing electricity consumption. And then there's a special program for communities who say, we are going to be really radical. And that's a program with 20 towns at the moment who say we're basically going to be totally emission-free or nearly emission-free. And I went to the ceremony where they got awarded this membership of being, among those forerunners. And the minister was there, and the mayors were there, and everybody was quite excited. And everybody was saying, but we signed up to this, but we don't know how to do it. Again, and we don't know how to do it. And to say that publicly means, from my perspective, okay, we have a transformation in front of us, and we need to figure out together how to do it. So there's a learning network of about 20 cities who engage that radically. They get quite massive financial support. They're being monitored by researchers, and their target is this. It's cities like Hanover, Frankfurt, but also smaller towns that are included. So, this is it's not going to be easy. The climate dialogue, and maybe that goes to your question now in terms of communication, is a program that the government put into the system so as to create spaces for reflection and connection between the different actors who work on local climate protection in one way or the other, to facilitate learning, coordination, and more collaboration between them. As I said, if we have 1,000 communities where something is going on and we need to get to 14,000, there's definitely a need to learn, and to learn quickly, to learn from each other and to learn together, and there's a need to mobilize and reach out a lot. And we can't do that if one network is working in Bavaria doing their little thing, and they've been doing that for 20 years, and another little network is working around the city of Rostock, and there's another one who's doing this. We need to pull together in a totally different way. So there's a lot of investment in dialogue and interaction right now, and that's being done through this program, Climate Dialogue. So there's also an understanding that just bringing people together in a traditional conference format and having speeches and then having a coffee break and then going home is not what it's going to do, but that we need different kinds of dialogue and interaction being facilitated for people. I just want to give you this. We did initially in that climate dialogue program, we said, okay, let's look at who are the actors actually in Germany and a little bit beyond. This is in German, I apologize. You can't read it all anyway, and a lot of it are acronyms because otherwise it won't fit. But this is a rough overview of who is a relevant actor in Germany working on issues relating to climate protection at the local level. So we have our ministries up there, and we have a bit of European Union and international level, but we kept this to the side. We have the German Länder, which are like the cantons, like provinces within the country, who are relevant in terms of the legislation, in terms of the structures and systems they put in place. Then we have research and consultants who provide expertise to local communities. If the mayor says, oh, now we're doing climate, that doesn't mean there's anybody in the administration who knows much about climate. You still have to get that expertise from somewhere. Then there's energy agencies, which are publicly supported, who provide advice on energy and energy technologies at the national level, the Länder level, at regional level, and at community level. In some areas where there are a lot, in others there aren't. We have civil society networks. For example, the Climate Alliance is a network of European cities. 400 something of them are in Germany. Cities who have signed up and said, yes, we want to do stuff to protect the climate. And a lot of local Bürgerinitiativen, citizens' initiatives at individual village and city level. So these are a few hundred, yeah? Then there are the churches. Some of them play a big role and have discovered environmental issues as something that they care about. And then we have finance, we have private sector, or a mix of public and private sector with the energy companies here. The private sector here is actually very small, but of course it's very big. Yeah? Just think about all the people who are dealing with buildings and providing materials for building and technologies for building. And then there's finance, as in public financing and private financing. And we have networks of municipalities. And, well, this is just a rough cut, yeah? But if we say we want to learn as much and as quickly as possible how to effectively turn around our energy systems at the local level and deliver that change, meaning we're not burning fossil fuels in our little town, we are shifting towards wind or solar energy, for example, then we need to quickly bring people together to learn how to do it. I will give you an example, and that's a new cooperative movement that has sprung up out of these changes. Cooperatives are a form of people coming together and running a business together with co-ownership. And in a lot of smaller towns in particular, if you then talk about renewable energy, you will ask, okay, where's the money going to come from to put up a windmill, to put up photovoltaics and so on. The municipality usually is broke, and there might be a little bit of support from the central government, but how do you do it? So if the city of Potsdam, for example, decides, okay, we want to go climate neutral, then they will have to turn to their citizens, and that's what they do. Particularly in smaller places, villages around Potsdam, for example, the local authorities have initiated cooperatives and say, we have a field here where we can put up a windmill. We don't have the money to build it, but we're inviting citizens to buy shares. And if you buy shares in this, we form a cooperative company, we put up the windmill and you co-own it. And if we ever make a profit, you will get your share of the profit. And the amazing bit about that is how many citizens are happy to invest in their locality. Yeah. This is being built here, I put my money there. Even if you just guarantee something like, the inflation rate being covered and nothing more. Even small villages say, and in a few weeks' time we gathered 2 million, and that was enough to put this up. And people are very happy living here because they say we have our own energy supply. We don't buy gas, we don't buy oil anymore. So it also creates a different identity at the local level. And that cooperative movement I find really, personally I find really fascinating, what people do, and it's actually quite simple. You have to facilitate the space, so you have to invite people to come together and do it, but you don't actually need, you don't need to put forward much money or anything else. You have to facilitate the space, and that's what the local authorities are often doing. Now, if a little village near Potsdam does that, that's all very fine and good, but that doesn't mean 14,000 are doing that. For that, we need what we call this climate dialogue program, so that we create opportunities for people to get together. Now, yeah, let me just where should I find it? So, components of that program include supporting the policy, the governmental level. Supporting the groups of people who work in the relevant ministries to come together for reflection and learning on a regular basis, twice a year, which is conversations that are usually not had. They're usually working in the environment ministry, they have the climate department, and then they have the energy department, and then in the economics department, they're not talking to the environment folks anyway, because they don't understand the economy. And then you have the finance department and a number of other ministries who are actually involved in the sense that they have to say yes to new programs. So the idea is to create a space for them to get together regularly, to learn from each other how we're solving problems and what kind of support we can give, but also to form a community over time. So one thing that we do, and we support there, is to reflect on the process that we're in. I'm just giving a few examples now. If you listen to this story, saying this is what's going on in Germany right now, I'm presenting that in my particular words, or my perspective, I'm presenting a story. Now, if I talk to some of the mayors and some of the climate experts, they will present that story from their perspective and a little bit differently. And what we're trying to do is to bring the key players from the government and from some of the researchers, some of the civil society networks, together regularly to co-create that story. What is the story that we're actually in? Is this just another hoo-ha that the government is doing, and in 2 years' time after the next election it is gone? Or is this the story of how Germany started to try and become climate neutral? it could be this, it could be that. But in conversation, we are reflecting upon how people perceive what is going on, and in that way, we together create a story that we maybe share. And one way of going about that, for example, is to bring people together and talk about how they perceive what is going on. But we also help them to relate to the history of local level climate protection in Germany. So one thing that we use is very simple. It's an Untitled it's basically this here is a long 4-meter long poster that has the timeline of what happened in terms of local climate protection in Germany since, I think, the 1980s until today. And then when people come together for a workshop, we give them post-its and say, put your name on that post-it and put it where you got involved in that issue. And then we invite people to talk about it. What is it that you did back then? And how did you see what you were working on back then? And how do you see it from today? And people tell each other the story of their own involvement and the story of what was happening at the same time. So it's a very simple tool. It's usually quite fun because we have people who have been doing this for 40 years and people who just joined 2 days before. Coming together and creating that story in the conversation. Yeah? It's a tool to create community because we believe that dialogue, it can be used to create community, and that creating a stronger community in this movement will help the movement's success. That's of course the hypothesis. So there's a lot of gatherings going on, being facilitated right now, workshops for specific target groups, reflections, circles, learning exercises. There is a training program being developed that also will help people to network. So there's, at strategic points, we offer platforms and facilitate spaces for people to get together, to increase learning, to steepen the learning curve, and to make this process quicker and irreversible. So politically, of course, the goal is to be, in 1 or 2 years' time, to be so far along that you can't reverse it anymore. We have elections in the autumn of 2013, so we're kind of in a hurry. Maybe I'll just leave it at that for the moment, and thank you for your attention. And I would like to invite you, instead of talking more right now, I would like to invite you to turn to your neighbors and have a conversation, 5 to 10 minutes, about what you heard, and see if you can come up with some questions that you would then want to put to me or to the group and that we can discuss. Yeah? So it's turn to your neighbors, 2s and 3s, talk about what you heard, what raises questions for you, and then I'll get you back together in 5 or 10 minutes. Okay?